Right. Welcome you to yet another session. Even as we continue to look at issues to do with the teaching profession and its ethics. So far, what we have looked at as regards to Unit 1, we set the background, we set the basics of what ethics is, right? So that now we can have an understanding of what it is that we are actually discussing in this particular subject. And so we looked at the definitions of what ethics is, the types of ethics, and what were the aims of ethics, the objectives, and also a number of other things, the theories that that have been developed over the centuries on the subject at hand. Right. Now, in Unit 2, we will continue to delve into, as we come close to the meat of what it is that we are looking at for in this particular course. Unit 2 deals with human values, ethics, and professionalism. There is an understanding that as teachers, we need actually to be oriented to such things so that we understand our value systems, right? And so basically what we're dealing with in Unit 2, we're going to look at human values, ethics, and how these actually relate to professionalism, as it were, right? So basically these are some of the items that we're going to look at. We're going to look at the definition of human values, and also the definition of virtues, Mackling's list of virtues, moral unit and integrity, honest and others. What is the significance of ethics, especially even as we talk about professional ethics? Why do we need to study ethics as a higher education program? We need to understand why you are seated in this particular class as a teacher, right? The nature of professional ethics. What is the criteria of professionalism? Factors responsible for the falling status of the teaching, and basically at the end of it all, we're going to look at the teacher's discipline, the rights and the responsibilities that are set forth by them. Right. So basically, these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in this particular lecture. But we will divide this Unit 2 into 3 segments, and then we'll look at the first segment as it actually follows. So what are the objectives of this particular unit? It is assumed that by the end of this particular unit, you and I, as the instructor and also as students, we should be able to define human values and virtues and enlist Mark Intler's list of virtues. What does he say about virtues? You should also be able to explain the significance of ethics to the teaching profession, and also suggest why ethics should be studied in higher education programs. Mention the nature, the criteria, and also the factors of professionalism in teaching. Identify the factors that are responsible for the falling status of the teaching profession, especially as it relates to Zambia and Africa as a whole. Discuss the teacher's rights, the responsibilities, and the privileges that tend to be there for teachers. Right. Now, what are we saying here? Ladies and gentlemen, the goal of this particular unit on professional ethics and human values is basically to ensure that students, as teacher trainees, you understand the moral values that ought to guide you as a teacher in the profession of teaching, right? And also that you resolve the moral issues in the teaching profession. You need to identify what are the moral issues that are there in the teaching profession, and then try to see how these can actually be resolved, and also justify the moral judgment concerning the teaching profession, as it were. You need to understand, therefore, that it is actually intended to develop a set of beliefs. When we have done a good job trying to conceptualize the various nitty-gritties in this particular course, especially as it pertains to Unit 2, we'll be able to, develop a set of beliefs, right? And also attitudes and habits that teachers should actually develop concerning morality, as it were. So the primary objective, therefore, as we sit here in this particular class, is to increase your ability to deal effectively with moral complexities in teaching practice. And we would see that there are a lot of these moral complexities that may land on our shoulders even as we practice in the teaching profession, right? So I know that we discussed the aspect of ethics, the definition of ethics in in Unit 1 as we started. But it may be a good idea so that we may lay a foundation about what value systems are, to again refresh our minds on what ethics is all about. Now, what is ethics? As we noted earlier on, ethics is a set of principles or standards of human conduct. And these standards of human conduct ultimately govern the behavior of individuals or organizations. So by these ethical standards, therefore, you and I as persons, or as a group of persons, or as an organization, we tend to regulate our behavior to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. And this, what is right and what is wrong, is as regard to what is actually perceived by the others. Because sometimes we tend to do things that are wrong, thinking that they are actually right. So whatever action, therefore, ethics assumes that whatever actions that we actually engage ourselves in, what do others actually perceive of that particular action, right? So philosophically speaking, and we saw in Unit 1, sorry, that the concept of ethics actually is of philosophical, it comes from the philosophical field, and we saw that it's actually one of the branches of philosophy. Okay, so when we philosophically speak about ethics, it is actually concerned with what is morally right and morally wrong in the sphere of a field of human activity. Right? So it can actually be defined as the discipline that deals with the moral duties and an obligation explaining what is good and not good for others and also for us. Right? Now, we need to understand here that when we talk about ethics, even as it regards to what is wrong and what is right, our actions, the emphasis in ethics is that our actions ultimately must be for the good of others, right? So when we think of doing what is right, it means that we're thinking about other people's what? Other people's welfare. And when we do otherwise, then it means that we are being unethical in nature. So the Cambridge Encyclopedia actually defines ethics as the branch of philosophy that deals with the concepts and the principles of morality, and also including such theoretical questions as the source and the foundations of morality. Where does morality actually come from? We saw in Unit 1 that ultimately our moral orientation is largely dependent on a number of factors that include our family upbringing, our culture, our tradition, sometimes to some extent even our religious affiliation in one way or the other. And so the status and therefore the justification of moral rules, the relationship between moral and other human objectives, and also the nature of the responsibility that we are likely to undertake as individuals. So ethics is the study of moral decisions. These moral decisions are basically to be able to be made by us in the course of performance of our duties. It is the study of the characteristics of morals, of deals, and it actually deals with the moral choices that are made in relationship with what? With other people. So in a nutshell, when we are talking about ethics, we are talking about a discipline that is concerned with truth, a discipline that is concerned with justice, in as far as we consider a variety of aspects like the expectations of society. What does society expect from us? Fair competition, right? Public relations, social responsibilities, and also corporate behavior. All these are found in the realm of our interaction on a day-to-day basis as actually human beings, right? So ethics is the word, that refers to morals, to values, and also to beliefs of individuals, of families, or of society. So it has several meanings. As if you read through literature, you find a number of scholars they put the meaning of ethics in their own field of study, in conformity with what they actually believe in their own field of study. So basically, it is an activity. It is a process of inquiry. It can also be said to be, different from non-moral problems when dealing with issues and controversies that may come our way. Ethics also may refer to a particular set of beliefs, attitudes, and habits of individuals. Not only of individuals, take note, there may also be habits, attitudes, and beliefs of families, of groups of people concerned with morals. It is therefore used to mean moral correctness. And we're going to see how this actually relates to our training as teachers. And so it therefore involves the inquiry, okay, on the existing situations, form judgments, and also resolve the issues that may be there. In addition, ethics tends to tell us how we must actually live, even as we respond to issues through our duties, through our rights, our responsibilities. Remember, they say that with more freedom comes a lot of expectations, okay? And also terms of obligation. Now, when we single out in the area of religion, there are similar principles that include, that are included, but the reasoning is basically on the procedures which are actually limited in nature. So the principles and practices of religions, when you look at how we practice our religions, the principles and practices tend to have varied from time to time, as history says it, all right? In terms of religion, in terms of society, the language, the case, and also the creed. But we need to take note here that ethics has actually grown to a large extent beyond the barriers listed. Now, in ethics, the focus is to study and to apply the principles and also the practices in a universal way, in such a way that what is agreed upon as teachers on how to behave in one particular country must not be different from what has been stipulated in terms of teacher standards in another country, right? So basically, the study on ethics helps to know the people's beliefs, their values, and their morals. It helps them to learn the good and the bad of them, the practices, right? And even as we maximize their well-being and the happiness of each human being in our lives, right? So basically, those are issues. As we lay the foundation of what ethics is, this is what we need to understand. Now, what are work ethics? Now, this is one of the terms that can loosely be used by individuals. Remember, we're dealing with education and professional ethics, the do's and the don'ts of the teaching profession. It begins, therefore, with the fact that we need to have a work ethic in order to understand exactly what ethics and human values are. By definition, it is said that work ethics may be defined as a set of attitudes. This set of attitudes that are concerned with the value of work, which forms the motivational orientation. Very, very important to understand. A set of attitudes, right? So as teachers, you need to have those set of attitudes that drives you to do what is right at your place of work. Okay, so the work ethics, therefore, is aimed at ensuring the economy, to get the job done, to create wealth, to earn a salary. It's a combination of aspects. In terms of productivity, we're talking about wealth creation, profitability, right? In terms of safety, we're talking about, living well in a workplace. In terms of health and hygiene, we're talking about working conditions that may actually motivate us to do more for the organization. In terms of privacy, we're talking about how to raise families. Okay, in terms of security, we by implication, we're talking about permanence against contractual pension and also retirement benefits. Cultural and social development in terms of leisure, hobby and happiness, welfare, social work, environment, anti-pollution activities, and also offer opportunities for all according to their abilities, but without actually discrimination. So you can see that ultimately what goes on in our workplaces is ethical in nature. The question is, how do we actually do these as particular activities for the benefit of both the society and also for the institutions that we actually work in, even as individuals, right? Now, in the study of ethics, there are what we call personal and professional ethics. Now, by personal ethics, as it were, personal ethics ultimately deals with how we treat others on our day-to-day lives. Okay, so there are many of these principles that are applicable to ethical situations that occur in the business of teaching also. Now, in relation to professional ethics, when we talk about professional ethics, this one involves choices at an organization level than at the personal level, right? So it basically involves relations between two organizations, between corporations and the government, and also with society or between groups of individuals, right? So basically those are the two distinctions between personal ethics and professional ethics. Now, when we talk about professional ethics and personal ethics, what is their common morality interaction? What is the interaction between professional ethics, personal ethics, and common morality, as it were? Now, we said therefore that basically when we talk about professional ethics, these are set of standards adapted by professionals insofar as they see themselves acting as professionals. In short, you set standards as teachers so that even as you act them out, you are acting them out because you have agreed that you are acting as profession. And no one within the profession will say, why are you doing what you are doing? In personal ethics, these are set to standards of one's own commitment and interpretation of moral and immoral acts. Usually, these are based on the early training received at home, our orientation. There are things that no matter how much of a Christian you become even later in life, you still practice them because this is how you have been oriented as an individual from time immemorial. Okay, and then when we talk about common morality, these are a set of standards that are shown by a certain community or a certain society. In which case, if you do otherwise, then people will question and say, where are you coming from, right? So what are the characteristics of common beliefs and morality? Let's look at the characteristics of common beliefs and morality. Now, among them include vulnerability. And we know that when we talk about vulnerability, we are talking about being susceptible for pain, suffering, and also unhappiness, and many other vices that may come our way. All right? Autonomy, we, at least to some degree, can think for ourselves and also make our own decisions regarding moral actions. Okay, that's autonomy. And then interdependence. This suggests that you and I depend, we depend on others in getting what we need to, what we want, and also for performance of our day-to-day duties. Shared expectations and goals. Remember, we are also social conscious individuals. And as such, we want to work together as teams. We want to enhance our reputation among others, right? And so common moral traits like, fair-mindedness, self-respect, respect for others, and many others, all these can be found in the most human beings possible. These are shared expectations and goals as it were, right? So what is the significance, therefore, of ethics? Is it of significance if we have to study issues of professional ethics? Let's see. Now, it is said that basically ethics correspond to basic human needs, right? So these basic human needs, these basic, ethical needs tend to compel organizations, our schools, our colleges and our universities to be ethically oriented, right? So it tends to create credibility and also image for the corporation, for the schools that we belong to with the public. You have heard of parents who would say, I cannot take my child to that school because of the behavior of the teachers or the behavior of the workers or the students at that particular school, right? So ethics improve the employee morale and improve the credibility of the management with the employees. How does it improve morale? It improves morale because when workers are able to understand that our superiors are not manipulative in the way they deal with issues, automatically subordinates will also follow suit, right? So ethics help better decision making. It improves the overall profits of a company. Okay, even it can also improve the standing of a school where you actually belong to. Ethics protect the society and the environment more than actually the law. When you are ethical, you don't need the law because you understand with reason that this I should not do and this I can do given the circumstances that may be there, right? So alternatively, the objectives of the study of professional ethics may be as follows, right? It's segmented in a number of ways. Number one, basically we study professional ethics to improve our cognitive skills. These skills are skills of the intellect in terms of how clear we want to think as individuals, right? Now, on the improvement of the cognitive skills, therefore, we bring issues of moral awareness in terms of proficiency in recognizing moral problems in the teaching profession. Also, to conjunct moral reasoning. By this, we mean comprehending, assessing different views that are actually said by individuals. Moral coherence. This is where we form consistent viewpoints based on facts, right? Moral imagination, where we search beyond the obvious, right? The alternative responses to issues and also being receptive to creative solutions. Remember, we are living in a global world in an innovative way. So we'll not be doing things as it were, even in the following times to come. Moral communication, to express one's support of one's views to others is very, very important. The second aspect, the second aspect has to do with, for the reason for professional ethics is that we are able to act in morally desirable ways towards moral commitment and responsible conduct. And on this particular aspect, we bring in the issues of moral reasonableness, all right? Where as individuals, we must be willing outrightly and be able to be morally responsible. It's our obligations. Respect for persons, which means showing concern for the well-being of others besides ourselves. And this is actually replicated. This is actually advanced also in the scriptures by Jesus. Tolerance of diversity, respect for ethnic and religious differences, right? And also acceptance of reasonable differences in moral perspective. Because remember, as we saw in Unit 1, what we regard as morally right may not be what another person actually regards. So we must meet at the center and make an understand, have an understand of why, of our differences in terms of how we do things, right? Moral hope in terms of believing in using rational dialogue for resolving moral conflicts when they actually come. Integrity, right? Which means moral integrity. And integrating one's professional life and also the personal conviction that they may actually be holding, right? So basically, those are the two aspects that are laid bare in terms of why we should actually study professional ethics, even as teachers. Now, yes, on a general view, that is what we could say. But then, if we say that we belong to an institution of higher learning, why then should ethics, the study of ethics, be imposed on you and I as individuals, as teachers in a given institution? Does it really matter for us to have an understanding of these issues in terms of ethics? Right? Now, you notice here that educational institutions, especially professional institutions, can actually play a significant role in improving a sound foundation for professional ethics and values to students. Right? Now, our understanding, in trying to understand the concept of ethics, and also in having an awareness of the professional codes of ethics, and their role in the nation in terms of building ourselves and building our communities. All this could largely help in developing a mindset that is tuned to precepts of ethics, and also these prefix as they apply among students, right? So basically, this awareness and this mindset tends to ensure that on graduation, as you graduate, you are able to carry a high sense of responsibility, a high sense of social responsibility, a high sense of commitment to uphold the degree and the honor of that particular profession. So in this course, we're going to orient you as a teacher. How do you behave, right? How do you behave as a teacher so that now ultimately people will say, yes, we like it because he belongs to that particular profession, right? So it is very, very important, therefore, that we have this inculcation of issues to do with professional ethics, even as we train you as teachers of tomorrow. So what are the advantages then of studying ethics in professional education? What are the advantages? Among these advantages are that it stimulates the moral imagination. What do we understand by this? Yes, imagination, remember, is needed to anticipate problems. Not only to anticipate problems, but also to minimize the chances of being taken by surprise. When we get into the teaching profession, there are quite a number of dilemmas, as we saw in Unit 1, there are a number of dilemmas that may have an impact on how we resolve issues, on how we operate as teachers. And so we need to realize that as we join the teaching profession, even as we continue in the teaching profession, there are issues that must not take us by surprise, because we may have interrogated them in courses like this one. Another advantage is that it tends to recognize ethical issues and also to distinguish them from the technical issues, so that now we're in a school scenario, we are able to point at an ethical issue when it actually arises. It helps develop analytical skills. As we learn, teachers are trained in analytical skills to be able to assume, to be able to analyze a situation as to whether it can warrant to be an ethical issue, right? So that now we are able to resolve these problems, resolve professional and also personal problems. They should be able to be trained in analytical skills in identifying and resolving and solving ethical problems as they come in our realm. Then another advantage is that it tends to elicit a sense of responsibility. Though every teacher or every person appreciates that we should undertake certain responsibility, even as we training you in professional ethics from the ethical point of view also would go a long way in trying to make you identify and practice within these responsibilities that are actually laid, right? And then also it helps us to provide codes of ethics that are ethical. So take note that ethical training would enable a teacher to appreciate and understand each other in the school system, on the canons, the standards, what is it that has been set for you to follow, as indicated in the codes of ethics, as they are actually drawn from the teaching professional bodies. I know that in Zambia, there is when you look at the last unit in this particular course, you are actually advised to establish and also to identify some of these professional bodies and what it is that they have drawn as a guide for you as teachers to actually follow, right? Another advantage of studying professional ethics as teachers is that they tend to provide case studies. Now, how? We would have learned how a certain aspect, a moral aspect, would have been dealt in one area, in one school, right? And then we are able to relate these case studies to what we are experiencing as teachers. So it provides case studies and also illustrations, right? These illustrations which can be of help to the employee to appreciate the right ethical decision for specific issues and also to develop the right thinking when problems crop up. Another advantage is that it ensures that the employees develop the ability and the freedom to express their concerns about issues like safety, or in other words, whistleblowing. We'll look at the issue of whistleblowing later on in successive units. It also fosters an ethical atmosphere and culture in the organization. Thereby, when this atmosphere is fostered, it tends to increase employee morale. This is what we are looking for in terms of the places where we are actually found. Right. So thank you so much for taking time to listen to this particular lecture. The second segment, we're going to look at human values and see how they actually relate to our to what we have so far discussed. Thank you so much, and I see you in the next session.